Some arguments for abortion don't merely permit abortion, they also permit killing newborn babies. Now, that claim isn't meant to shock you emotionally, and it isn't a rhetorical trick, but it's actually the explicit conclusion of one of the most popular philosophical frameworks that continues to shape modern defenses of abortion today. And in this video, we're going to examine the argument associated with philosopher Michael Tooley, an argument that again, many people appeal to, and often without realizing where it leads and why ultimately it fails once the implications are made clear. For those of you who don't know me and are new to the channel, my name is Rafael. I'm the host of the Small Town Bible Questions YouTube channel, and I help answer your Bible questions and anything related to Christianity. Again, if you're new to the channel, I would love it if you would like this video, subscribe to the channel, and make sure that you don't forget to hit that bell notification icon. That way you don't miss any of the future videos that I make, and it also helps me out with the whole YouTube algorithm thing and helps other people find this kind of content. So now that the whole YouTube stuff is done, let's get back into today's topic. Now, Michael Tooley is a philosopher best known for arguing that human beings don't have a right to life simply by being human. Now, while many people today repeat versions of his arguments, especially in online discussions like on TikTok, far fewer are aware where his line of thinking or leads to, because it doesn't just stop at abortion. And Tooley himself is explicit about where his argument leads. And that destination matters because it exposes the moral cost of adopting his standard. Now, at the center of Tooley's view is the claim that being alive, or even being biologically human and belonging to the species Homo sapien, is not enough to have a right to life. According to him, a being only has a serious right to life if it is capable of self-consciousness, meaning the ability to think of itself as the same individual existing over time. In other words, Tooley believes you only have a right to life if you can understand yourself as a continuing me with the future. The way that he gets there is by building his argument in a few steps. First, he claims that you cannot have a right to something unless you have an interest in it. Next, he argues that you cannot have an interest in continuing to live unless you want or desire continued existence. And then finally, he claims that you cannot desire continued existence unless you are aware of yourself as a being who exists over time, meaning someone who can think, I will still be me tomorrow. In other words, his argument says if you cannot think about yourself as a continuing person with the future, then you cannot want to keep living. And if you cannot want to keep living, then you do not have the right to life. And since fetuses, and here's the kicker, even newborn babies cannot think about themselves in that way, Tooley concludes that they do not have a right to life. And again, this is not a straw man or, me trying to push a conclusion to his position. Tooley states directly, he writes, since a newborn baby is not a person and therefore not a subject of a right to life, infanticide is in itself morally acceptable. Now, those are his words. This is not an accidental implication of his argument. It is exactly what his framework is designed to allow. Now, some people will actually, and even in hearing that, will bite the bullet and say, well, hey, if infanticide is what follows, then, so be it. But even if someone accepts that horrible conclusion, a deeper problem remains. The problem is not just of what Tooley's view allows, but it also is what it fails to explain. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, in Tooley's view, he identifies a psychological threshold and treats crossing it as morally decisive, but he never explains why that threshold should be what grounds inviolable moral worth. Why should having already formed certain mental concepts suddenly transform killing from morally permissible to morally forbidden? Nothing new has come into existence when self-awareness develops. That same individual exists before and after that point. So Tooley's standard doesn't ground moral worth in personal identity, it grounds it in the prior acquisition of specific mental abilities. Moral protection doesn't attach to who the being is, but to what it already has been able to do. At this point, some people might respond by saying that consciousness is simply what we as humans value. That self-awareness is really what matters morally. But again, that response highlights another deeper problem. Appealing to what some people may value is not the same as explaining what grounds that moral truth. Others may value personal identity or the kind of being something is or the natural continuity of human life. Again, Tooley gives no argument for why his preferred value of consciousness should override all others. Without such a justification, the psychological threshold becomes arbitrary. It marks a line, but it doesn't explain why that line has moral authority. Drawing a line is not the same thing as grounding a right. And once moral worth is tied to prior acquisitions of ability rather than identity itself, it becomes unstable. It appears abruptly at a psychological threshold, depends on mental development, and excludes entire classes of human beings who haven't crossed that line yet. Moral protection is no longer something you have by just simply being the kind of being you are. It's by acquired by meeting certain conditions. That move, again, has unavoidable consequences. If human beings qualify for the right to life only after crossing a mental threshold, then other human beings don't qualify at all. And again, that doesn't just apply to fetuses in the womb, it also applies to newborn infants who would be excluded. And the standard that excludes them doesn't even explain why that prior acquisition of certain mental abilities should be what grounds inalienable moral worth. It simply assumes that those abilities are morally decisive. And again, this is where Tooley's framework collapses. A theory of rights is supposed to explain why all members of a group are entitled to equal protection. But Tooley's standard cannot explain equality. It divides human beings into those who count and those who do not, based on mental development. Some qualify, others don't. And again, once moral worth is tied to the prior acquisition of abilities rather than the identity itself, equality collapses. Because again, some humans qualified, others don't, infants are excluded, and any framework that justifies killing newborn children cannot serve as the foundation for justice. So to recap, Tooley's argument claims that only beings who have already developed self-consciousness, the concept of themselves as continuing subjects with desires about their own future, possess a serious right to life. And again, fetuses and even newborns have not yet crossed that psychological threshold, and so on his view, killing them can be morally acceptable. And again, that conclusion is not a misunderstanding of his position, it is exactly where his reasoning leads, and that alone should give us a pause. Any moral framework that classifies newborn children as killable, that grounds moral worth in the prior acquisition of mental abilities rather than in personal identity, and that makes dignity conditional on psychological development is not merely mistaken, it is dangerous. Such a framework cannot account for equal human worth. It replaces shared humanity with a hierarchy of value, where moral protection is earned by crossing mental milestones and withheld from those who have not. And once dignity depends on ability rather than identity, the weakest are left without protection by definition. Now that is all for today's video. If you enjoy this video, again, I would love it if you like, subscribe to the channel, and make sure you don't forget to hit that bell notification icon. That way you don't miss any of the upcoming videos that I'll be making where I go over other philosophers who make similar arguments on consciousness and to kind of support the view on abortion. So if you like this video and don't want to miss the next ones, don't forget to subscribe. Till next time, God bless.